right, with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Chris Cunningham. So I think I got to put my glasses on for this, Chris. So Dr. Cunningham is a UC Foundation professor and graduate faculty member at the Department of Psychology at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and also serves as the Industrial and Organizational Psychology graduate program director at UTC. Dr. Cunningham teaches a wide variety of graduate courses in IO psychology, as well as a variety of core courses within the undergraduate psychology curriculum at UTC. He also teaches research methods and assessment development to undergraduate psychology majors and is currently the graduate program director for the master's degree program in IO Psych. Dr. Cunningham is continuously engaged in research, primarily with an eye to occupational health psychology topics, such as workers' needs for recovery from stress work, the influence of individual differences in personality and fitness on the stress process, and issues regarding work, non-work role integration. Dr. Cunningham received his psychology Bachelor of Arts degree from Lehigh University and a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology from Bowling Green State University. He is also a certified DARE to lead instructor. And I also want to say that Dr. Cunningham and I met virtually in 2020 during COVID. I cold called him. I had worked with some of his graduates, which was really what inspired me to give him a call as we started working through the Smart Factory. And I would say that he has become a good friend over the 5 years, and I'm always impressed with the work that him and his students do. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Cunningham.
You want to sit here, or you want me to?
No, you can go ahead and present there. I'll just, for when we do the applications.
So I appreciate that introduction, Denise. And I also want to just thank the several grad students that I have with me today. Can you guys just raise your hands real quick? So they're going to be facilitating some breakout discussions after this session this morning. So there's no test, but I do hope that you listen and want to actually reflect on this and discuss this as we get a little bit further in. Is this... All right, there you go. So one of the things Denise and I were talking about trying to present this morning was an overview for you guys of what we've been up to for the past 5 years. She mentioned that we've had this deep partnership, and sometimes the work we do, especially if it's research driven, it can kind of hide behind some kind of screen, and it's not always apparent to the practitioners and the folks that are out there doing the work whether this matters, why this would matter, how would I put this to use. So I'm going to try to present a high-level overview for you today. If any of this is interesting to you, please come and talk with one of us later. We'll be happy to give you more details on this. Is it moving on its own now? Which way is it going? All right. Okay. So over the past 5 years, we've tried to build a foundation up to where we are now. As this change to Industry 4.0 is affecting organizations in different ways, sometimes it tends to affect large organizations first and then kind of trickle its way down to smaller organizations. What we started discussing when Denise reached out to me was all the emphasis and energy at the time about 5 years ago was on the engineering implications, the computer science implications, the technology implications. And it's great if you make your organization smart and high technology, but if we're not also doing something to make sure that the workforce keeps pace, that the management team keeps pace, that there are systems in place to help folks perform and be effective in these environments, all the technology in the world is not going to matter, okay? So we started talking at that point about 5 or 6 years ago about the idea of a smart worker and a smart manager, not trying to be insulting to what they were already able to do cognitively, but the fact that they would be able to function well in these highly advanced environments. So in that first year, we focused on how does Industry 4.0 impact organizations and the workers within them. We then moved into developing a toolkit for managers in these environments. How could you be more effective at working with these individuals as they're trying to upskill and get used to this new and advanced technology? In year 3, we focused on translating all that background research into a toolkit that can be rolled out to help develop and improve management capabilities. In year 4, we started focusing on how can we help organizations assess their readiness to implement Industry 4.0 technologies. This is actually a big issue in a lot of the work that I do with other organizations when we're managing organizational development or change. one of the big criteria up front is your company ready to do this change now? Or are there other pieces that have to be put in place before this can be successful? So we put in place some guidelines in terms of what would you need to assess for readiness in that kind of context. And then in this year 5, we've been looking at how do we leverage advanced technologies in assessment to guide not only selection and placement, but also ongoing development and training, capacity building within your workforce. So I'm going to try to quickly go through these for you to give you a sense of where all this work went. Denise has some examples that she's going to illustrate about what they were able to do with the background work, and then we'll be able to move on from there. So in year 1, again, we started by doing a really deep workforce analysis. People in my line of work as an industrial and organizational psychologist, this is what we call a bread and butter task. We are trained to break jobs down into their component tasks and then to back out from there and figure out what do individual workers need to be able to know and to do and to think and to feel, and how do they need to be motivated so that they can get these tasks done. So we call that kind of a work analysis. So we dug into that using all kinds of different resources we have access to through our different channels. And we were able to figure out a variety of different ways in which these new technologies were going to change the nature of manufacturing work. We then took that background research and in phase 2 set about trying to define what is a smart worker. And we define workers in terms of their knowledge, skill, ability, and competency profile. And so that's kind of where this work went during that first year. Some of the things that we found over this is that this is just kind of a rough illustration of what one of these kind of breakdowns look like. A specific example of a traditional manufacturing role would be an operator. So somebody that's out there doing some sort of physical task. In an Industry 4.0 environment, it's not always the case that that individual can just still be an operator. Now they actually have to be sort of an operator / or dash technician, because a lot of times the operation that they're managing isn't being directly managed by the person. They're doing it through some sort of computer interface or some sort of technology or augmented interface. So they can't just be good at operating, they also have to be good at troubleshooting and managing whatever that mediating interface happens to be. Their original skill set and knowledge base is still super valuable, but for them to be able to put that into practice, they may need another level of training or another way of interacting with the tools of the trade, which have been evolving, okay? And this was just one illustration that kind of was generated during that work. So the idea, again, is through this initial year 1 research, the technology adoption, investments in all of this advancement is great, but it's not going to actually yield the return on investment that most companies are looking for unless we're also simultaneously investing in raising the bar with the workforce so that they can leverage that technology and get the benefits out of it. What we ended up doing at the end of year 1 was developing a couple of key technical reports, which we then made available with Smart Factory Institute, and they've made available to users like you, and they're still available if anybody's interested in reading these. Outlined some key trends, laid a foundation for the smart workforce, illustrated what the profile was, and outlined what would have to happen to help achieve that profile in ongoing development. So I mentioned before, we do this in terms of KSAOs, knowledge, skill, ability, and other characteristics. And to put it at kind of a high level, what this boiled down to is in more traditional manufacturing settings, a lot of emphasis have been placed on the physical and the technical KSAOs, and that made a lot of sense given the nature of the work. As we looked at where this work was heading and what types of abilities were going to be needed, what types of tasks were going to be added, we saw a need to grow the methodological, social, and intrapersonal skills. And I don't want to get super lost in the weeds with you guys today because we don't have a ton of time, but methodologically, needing to be able to troubleshoot when things aren't going the way you think they are, that's becoming an increasing challenge because when it was you doing the work and something wasn't right, you could often figure out what was wrong because, again, it was an extension of you. When you're doing the work through some other technology and something's not going exactly the way you want, you now need to be able to know how to work through and troubleshoot through that technology. And that requires a slightly different skill set, almost like a researcher's mindset to be able to test your little hypotheses and kind of make tweaks and adjustments. Not all manufacturing workers have any of that training, and so sometimes we need to raise the bar when it comes to that. On the social side of things, in many organizations, the pace of work is increasing and the interdependence of work is also increasing as these technologies get adopted. So there becomes a need and opportunity to raise the bar with respect to social related knowledge, skill, and abilities. It's not that all manufacturing workers are antisocial, that's not what I'm saying, but it is the case that maybe many of them have not learned proper and effective skills for communication, team coordination, building cohesion in a unit. And so there's an opportunity here to kind of raise that area. And then on the intrapersonal, One of the biggest challenges that we heard and kind of ran across in that first year as we started talking with different organizations and groups of workers is many people that have been doing manufacturing work for many years are resistant to the idea that I'm going to have to learn something new, or there's no way you're ever going to train me to do this job differently. Like, this is just how I do my work. And so one of the big interpersonal challenges is, how do you help instill a mindset of continuous learning and growth? How do you help people realize, like, it is possible to still be doing your job, but to do it in a slightly different way? And how can organizations go about helping their workforce do this? And so this was kind of the focus and the expansion of the traditional model when it came to KSAOs. I think in the interest of time, I might have to skip through these, okay? But just so you know, it didn't just stay at that high level. So I will just gloss through these slides, but just to give you a sense of, like, what are we talking about? We talk about physical KSAOs. We're talking about things like you see on the slide here, everything from the physical ergonomic challenges to your ability to perceive things at a higher level of speed, to make sense of it as the speeds increase. Also being able to control machines and processes that you might not have had exposure to previously. With respect to technical things, having an increased knowledge and appreciation for basic engineering principles and concepts. Again, increasing your comfort with computers and electronics. Also learning how to inspect equipment, structures, and materials, maybe in different ways than you were used to doing in the past. Because again, you may not be interfacing with them directly, but there may be other systems and other augmented tools that are helping you do your work. From a methodological side, I gave you a couple examples already, but this would also include methods for troubleshooting. Methods for being alert to problems as they arise. Again, if you're working in a higher pace, higher technology environment, you might not be alerted to things unless you know which metrics to watch and which kind of symptoms and signs to be monitoring to make sure everything's moving smoothly. And on a social side, realize too that there's an opportunity when you're working with high technology and you're collaborating with different people. Sometimes these people aren't even on site with you. How are you going to be effective in listening well and speaking well and making sure information is being conveyed clearly? Because again, as the pace and complexity of the work grows, we can't afford to have miscommunications and missteps that could have been avoided. And then on the interpersonal side of things, I was alluding to this earlier, but developing critical thinking skills, also improving decision-making and problem solving. And again, it's not that manufacturing workers can't do this, but sometimes when you increase the numbers of inputs and the complexity of the inputs, people have a sort of deer in the headlights response. They just freeze. They don't know what to do with all this information. It's hard to make sense of. And so there becomes a need to kind of walk people through, when you see these different inputs, here's what you need to do with them, and creating decision trees, helping people understand how do you navigate those complex processes. So all of those are detailed more deeply in the reports that we provided. And then Denise and her team were able to take this and turn it into something even more tangible.
Yeah, so we thought it was really important from the Smart Factory that if we're making this investment in this research, that we turn it into something that is applicable and something that you can use. So I encourage you during your break to come on up and take a look. Over here on the right-hand side, this poster right here shows the Smart Factory worker, the KSAO elements. And you can see that it starts off, we have 1 through 36 elements. This is for the worker, and it is color-coded. So you can see we have the interpersonal, the physical, the technical, the methodological, and the social. And each element of those that Dr. Cunningham was showed is shown here on this table in this graph. So it shows it to you all in once. And this is available to you at no cost. We can provide that to you so that you can kind of point out which elements are important to you and your worker in the job that you're doing. Also, we've been doing job analysis for a lot of manufacturers where we will go in and we'll analyze the job, and we'll be able to go through and highlight what this is. In the past, most job analysis were basically physical. That's what they did is, how much are you pushing? How much does it weigh? How much are you lifting? Are you lifting over your shoulders? We still do the physical aspect of it, but we have included into there the technical, the methodological, the social, and the intrapersonal. And we can provide that to you because that is becoming more and more important as the physical requirements are becoming less important. And the 2 reports, they're available on our website, so you can use this QR code, or you can go to the website and just search it and you can download the report. Also, on our training platform, the app is free to download. You can see presentations about the report. So if you don't want to go through and read the 60-page report, you can watch a presentation on it.
And I would just highlight, like, this is the kind of model that we've built over the years, is that we will discuss what is the need that we need to help you meet with your clients or help you guys meet with the people that you work with. We'll do that background work, we'll do that workforce analysis, we'll share that information, and then Denise and her team help make it packaged and deliverable to you all. And this is a great illustration of a partnership between industry and academia to solve real problems. And I just highlight that because as I go through the next few years of this, I think you'll see some ways in which this continues to evolve. I'm going to admit, this year one was really deep data stuff, and it may seem kind of like unnecessary, but without that foundation, everything else we've been doing for the past few years wouldn't have made sense, okay? So this laid the groundwork. Year two, what we did was focus on, okay, so if that's what we need to find in workers, let's recognize that sometimes we can train in development, but sometimes we need to actually go and recruit it and find it and select it in different ways as well. So this year was focused on how do these changes affect basic talent management functions within manufacturing organizations. And this involved looking at everything from recruitment to selection, all the way down to how we're designing and developing and implementing reward systems. And one of the things that came out of this was the year one was focused on the worker. Year two is now, well, what do smart managers need to be able to do then to work with this population and to retain and engage with this population? And to try to represent this simply, it boiled down to 5 core kind of competency areas that we focused on building out in year two. So one was kind of exploring what would management in an Industry 4.0 environment need to be able to do communication-wise. What would they need to do with respect to technical competence, training and development, talent management, and strategic planning. I'm not telling you that these are competencies that weren't important before. They are, but they become increasingly important when you start to move into a version of industry that is accelerating rapidly, where change is continuous, where the technology load is high, and we are also trying to reshape our workforce at the same time that we're reshaping our processes and our technology. That's a lot of change happening at one time. We need to have people in management roles that are able to handle that. So again, I'm not going to go through each of these in great detail. If you're curious, we have the reports, we can share them with you. But some of the more kind of faceted nature of these dimensions with respect to communication, not just communication in general, but specifically change communication. Like, there's an art and a science to how you help people prepare for and work through change. You don't just throw it on them and say, hey, today your job is different, right? Like, usually we give them a little time to get ready for it and we walk them through that process. But not all managers know how to do this. In fact, most people don't know how to do this until they've actually been taught how to do this. So that's a necessary kind of development area. And also kind of providing feedback. Like, the way you provided feedback initially was maybe more oriented toward the physical aspects of the job, but now you're gonna have to provide feedback on different systems and different processes than you had before. With respect to technical competence, there's all kinds of advancements here that need to be retrained and grown within the managerial workforce. There's aspects of this new system that many of the managers don't understand, and it's hard for them to manage if they don't understand what they're managing, right? So there's a need to kind of upskill that part of the workforce as well. With training and development, really helping again to kind of build into place that growth mindset, that drive for continuous learning, which has not always been present in a lot of manufacturing organizations. That requires a shift in how we go about doing the management role. Also really starting to get better at identifying high potential and trying to track these people into more accelerated learning and growth roles, also future management roles and positions, because we know we're going to need this more advanced kind of perspective going forward. With respect to talent management, there's all kinds of different challenges that arise. Again, I won't go through all of these right now, but some of the challenges right now is how do we create these environments where the pace and complexity may increase, but we're also managing things safely, keeping people engaged in their work? How do we create opportunities to make sure that their job and work descriptions are always accurate and always being refined? What can we do to make sure that we're selecting and placing people in their best jobs so that that fit is maximized between what they're able to do, what they're motivated to do, and what the jobs require? And then with strategic planning and management, how are we able to continue to anticipate change, help our workforce move with us and with the organization as it continues to move forward? Usually, if an organization is investing a ton of resources in this new advanced technology, there's also a new strategic plan or direction for the organization. And that is going to mean that the entire organization has to start moving in that new direction. Well, you don't just decide, again, one day this is going to happen. This is something where people have to be kind of shepherded and guided down that path. And that may require some different approaches to management than what has been the norm in the past, where maybe the norm was, let's just keep doing what we've been doing. Let's maintain that status quo. This is a different kind of management. So we use this information to help identify gaps. I'm now analyzing kind of where is an organization now, where do they need to be with respect to these different management capabilities. We developed some strategies. We started to identify specific principles for doing training and development, specifically with adults rather just in a general sense, because adult learning is different than student-based learning. Not that students aren't adults, but when you're working with experienced adults who've been working for a long time, you can't just say to them, hey, this is something that's important. You always have to explain why. You have to connect the new stuff with what they knew before. There's different approaches to educating that kind of population. And so this led to the development of a Smart Manager Toolkit, which involved strategies for doing talent management in a different way, managing change and adoption, workforce development features, and also managing performance in these newer environments as well.
So on my left and on your right, you will see we developed the same type of table, but this is for the manager. So when you get a chance and during breaks, come on up and you can take a close look at them. Just know this one's for the worker. That one on your right is for the manager. And you can see that again, it's color coded. So we have communication, strategic planning and management, technical competencies, talent and development, and then talent management. And on the manager one, we have 50 elements that make up for the manager.
So year 2 is focused on laying the groundwork for all of this work. We then had to figure out what can we do with that groundwork to make it even more useful to organizations like yours. And so we focused on implementing all that background research into the development of learning modules, and also tools and techniques and strategies for building manager capabilities. This is something we call evidence-based integration, where we're trying to tie together all these pieces and make them more useful for you. So this involved focusing heavily on practical training and workforce applications. There was a real emphasis, again, in this year 3 of transitioning or translating what we had done kind of scientifically into practice.
And so what we developed out of this was a training program for a manager. And so this is the layout of that class. You can see it's called Leading the Smart Factory Worker. It is a certification. It is made up of 4 courses, 4 half-day courses, so 2 days total to be certified in that. And each of the courses are around motivating, retaining talent, managing change, talent management, and then maximizing efficiency.
In year 4, we then shifted to a higher level within the organization, that is assessing the organization's readiness for changing and adopting Industry 4.0 technology, because what we were hearing from a lot of the clients Denise was working with is, this all sounds really great, but we're a small or medium-sized company. We're not ready to do this. We don't think we're ready to do this. How do we know if we're ready to do this? That's a really good question. And so we set about trying to create some tools that would be used with organizations to help them figure out, is now the right time, or what are some other pieces we need to get in place before we kind of take this plunge? So this is what we were diving into in year 4. And what we ended up doing is creating some tools to assess readiness at a couple of different levels, using subject matter experts. That would be people who might be in management or leadership roles, but also folks who've been with an organization for a long time and they know how that business operates. They would be key sources of input. We created some tools to then deploy within organizational environments, specifically a manager readiness assessment and an employee readiness assessment, because you actually have to have both things in place before any big change like this is going to be successful. I know we're running really tight on time today, so I apologize for going so quickly through this, but this is one of the newer things that we were working on developing just last year, and this has been translated into tools that Denise and team can use with their clients. We also provided scoring standards and guidelines, and created some kind of scenario-based applications of how this would be used in practice to help clients identify where their gaps are and then develop strategies for helping them close those gaps. So this is not just an assessment to say where you are, it's also a guide to figure out how do we get from where we are to where we need to be so that we're ready to do these implementations.
And so, we do assessments on equipment and in technology. And so when we started talking about this is, our basis is the technology and the equipment isn't everything you need. You also have to have the human capital or the human talent that goes with that. And so we took the research and we actually turned that into assessments. This is what it looks like on our platform. This is the manager competency assessment. There also is a work worker one. This is free of charge based off the research. Let's go to the next slide. I can give you an example of what it looks like. So there'll be some questions, and for instance, it says, please rate your skill level for each of the following statements, develop positive and collaborative relationships with the team members. And then there's answers for that. The assessment for the manager can take about 30 to 40 minutes to go through, but it will give you results based out of that on where you stand at that time. And we encourage people to take that annually to kind of see how you're progressing, and that's in the spirit of continuous improvement.
Right. And then the results of that they don't just have to sit there. Like, you can take those results and then work with Denise and team or internal folks to then decide, how do we go about addressing some of these gaps that these assessments are showcasing for us. The most recent thing we've been working on this year is that people in my line of work also do a lot of work with assessing talent. So we screen talent, we help companies select talent, we help them place talent in the right positions. There's a ton of advancement right now with the technologies, the same technologies that are changing the way manufacturing operates, they're changing the way assessment operates. So we've been digging deeply this year into 3 specific forms of advanced technology that have implications for how you select talent, how you then train and develop talent. And so to get into this at a high level, one of these major advancements is work sample assessments. On the left, work sample assessments are high fidelity simulations. In the past, they had to be done by people coming in person, very time intensive and costly setups where you might kind of rig up some sort of operator device and see if people can work through the specific task in a repeated fashion with a high degree of accuracy. That's still really powerful, but it's not scalable. And if you have major hiring needs, this ends up being really challenging. With the technologies we have now, we can create this in a virtual space. We can do this even through basic internet connections without having to have any advanced technology at all. And what's great is it creates a realistic job preview for folks. Instead of using some sort of proxy type test where you're asking questions about general past experience, personality, we can actually see, how do you handle this situation that you're likely to experience in the actual job that we want to hire you for? And that improves your ability to make a better informed decision about who you're bringing on board. Similarly, situational judgment tests, SJTs, have become really popular within assessment more generally. They are hard to create, but when they're built, they again create an opportunity to provide a test drive, if you will, of what this person is likely to do, not just what they know, but what would they likely do in the actual work environment. So these are scenario-based tests where you're asking people to demonstrate judgment based on their full KSAO profile. And then immersive technologies are some of the more advanced techs where we might use goggles or other devices to create a virtual or simulated reality that maybe augments or overlays information on top of what is actually present. What's great about these technologies, you can deploy them in almost any environment and create an opportunity to train, develop, assess, test people in any kind of location you might have. Even on the floor of your plant, you would have the opportunity to have somebody step aside and get engaged with technology like this. So these tools are super advanced, but what they're doing is allowing us to get way more precise and accurate in not only how we select people, but how do we evaluate their long-term competence, figure out what might need to be developed, work about figuring out who's going to be promoted and what might they need to be upskilled on before they can be promoted, and then also figure out how would compensation have to change now that we know you have these skills or you're about to have these skills as they continue to be developed. And so we've also found that these advanced technologies make it possible to weave in other strategies that we know are really key for learning. And as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the challenges we have with manufacturing workers, is getting them excited about wanting to train and develop and learn things that seem outside their scope. When you're using these advanced technologies, you can also weave in gamification and other elements that have been shown to keep people engaged. So they're not just passively listening to a lecture, they're not just passively clicking through an online portal, they're actually engaging and being like rewarded with information and points that pulls them through the training and helps ensure that they're learning things in a deeper and more real way. And when we can do all this, we have the opportunity to tie together now a lot of things we've been working on for the past 5 years. So we have a more complete sense of the smart worker and manager KSAOs and requirements. We know how to use assessment in a more advanced way to bring that talent into the organization and put it where it needs to go. And then we have other tools for helping us kind of navigate where they fit within the organization, how they grow and develop in the organization, and also how that organization changes and manages change going forward. So those past 5 years of work really do stitch together pretty well and provide a host of resources and tools, not only for Denise and her team, but for many of you as well, if you're interested in digging into some of these resources later. Oops, I think I clicked too much. I'm sorry. Hang on. Okay. So the next step that we wanted to do with you today, unless you wanted to add anything else before.
Yeah, I have to show
Okay.
on that.
After this portion is done, we're going to be inviting you all to break out into some discussion groups. These are going to be facilitated by graduate students from our IO program at UTC. Each one targets a slightly different theme. So you see we've got one focused on how do we ignite motivation within workers within these environments. Another one is how do we adapt, evolve, and succeed in managing change. How do we harness these advanced assessment tools and technologies for selection, training, and development? How do we unlock non-traditional talent pools? And how do we go about driving performance excellence with more advanced metrics and more advanced performance management strategies? It's not that you go to one of these sessions and we're just going to kind of lecture you and provide answers. What we want to do is have a conversation with you. If any of these topics are on your minds right now, things that you're struggling with, things you feel like you've made headway on, and you're open to sharing some of those thoughts with others, that's the purpose of these breakout sessions. We're going to be listening, gathering notes, and then trying to synthesize all this information to share back with you all later so that we can keep learning from each other in this collective way. But doing it in this way allows us to be really efficient with your time and get this information out to you in a really tightly packaged way.
So I did want to show, as we're talking through this, of course, this year's research isn't done, and so I'm going to show you just an example of what that could look like. This is on our training platform right here. We call this the SAVE, which stands for Safety Awareness and Virtual Exploration Survey Questions. Let me see if I can get this video going here. There you can go. You can see that we're entering into the portal. And then we'll be exploring this 3D space. Of course, this is just an example. It's a little bit rudimentary for us right now, but we are able to look around and explore. You can see there's little tags in each of the areas. This one was specifically for safety. We're also trying to develop one for maintenance and some other areas. And we'll be using the research that Dr. Cunningham and the students have put together for us to make sure that we are developing these that meet those requirements. And this is a way to engage the learner and keep them interested in what's going on. And then this is actually asking some questions, but we also have some tags in here that we can highlight different areas that are really important.
This is an example, again, of that augmented assessment approach, right? That includes some gamification elements and can create a much more engaging training tool or opportunity than what you might have right now, which is more of a static kind of delivery mechanism, most likely.
I did want to recognize our advisory board. And so any companies here, if you just want to raise your hand, that if you are a board member, I see a lot of you, so don't be shy. But this is our talent and training advisory board members. They meet quarterly, and they really give us the direction and where we need to be heading. Dr. Cunningham and the students presented to them. They give feedback on that. They provide us the feedback and training that is important. So if you are interested in joining our talent and training advisory board, please see Skylar Randolph, and he'll talk you through that.
Okay, we have a question right here.
Ricky Singletary from Eaton Corporation. So first of all, thank you for sharing all the great insights. My question though is, as we see technology continuing to evolve, how have you guys considered those changes and how to incorporate that from that cycle of improvement or that continuous improvement mindset into a lot of the tools that you've developed?
Oh, is a concern that tools that were developed in year 1 or 2 might need to be evolved or adapted further?
Yeah.
Or yeah, so that's part of why we've tried to maintain this relationship for as long as we have. Is every year we kind of keep looking back and asking ourselves, have there been any more advancements that necessitate kind of modifying any of these frameworks? So far, the good news is that that initial year 1 and 2 work we did has held up really well. There have not been changes to the technology or the processes that necessitate changes there. But you're absolutely right. As things continue to evolve, we may for sure have to go back and look at some of that. One thing that's kind of important here is that a lot of what we've been focusing on right now are pretty fundamental human core attributes that need to be addressed. And the thing is, those don't tend to change quite as quickly as technology changes, but it is something we have to keep looking back on for sure. Yeah, good question. I know that was real high overview stuff, so it makes sense. There may not be a ton of questions right now, but maybe as these breakout sessions get underway, other things will surface. And as Skylar said, we're not planning to run away right after the presentation. So if you do have questions, you want to talk to any of us, please do so throughout the day. Okay.
And we do encourage you to bring you and your team members up to see the Smart Factory Worker KSAO elements as well as the manager elements.
You can see here we have group 1 through 5 and which is on there. If you brought a whole team, I recommend dividing and conquering so that you can participate in all of them.
When you arrive in your group, the student facilitators will briefly introduce themselves so you know who you're working with. But what you all need to know right now is our Master's of Science program at Iowa Psych is one of the top in the world. So we recruit the best and the brightest from all over the place. The 5 that are with me today are some of our sharpest students. They're good facilitators. They know what we're all about. They're excited to work with you all. So don't be afraid at all to be sharing anything that's coming up because they're going to hear it. They're going to understand it. They're going to work with you.